Hello, welcome to another episode of Group Therapy. My name is Justin. I'm joined today by Derek and Luke. And today we're going to kind of go off of what we did a few episodes back on setting up your AR for defensive use. I recently just purchased an AR. It's my first one. Derek will show you the lovely black rifle. So I have a lot of questions with it now because I don't have a lot of friends that shoot it other than you, Derek, and you're a busy man. We're busy men. So I want to have an episode today on I bought my first AR, now what? So I've got a series of questions. I want to pick your guys' brain on basically where do you go after you pick up an AR, even if you've got accessories for it, like I've got my optic. I've got it set up the way I want to get it set up, which we touched on in that episode of setting up your AR for home defense. But today's going to be a little more specific. I want to talk about, taking it to the range. What are some exercises you should be doing with it? And I guess I'll start asking questions and we'll see where it goes. I'm going to let you kind of start us off, Derek, with I want to know more about what makes an AR a pistol versus a rifle, and what are some considerations or laws or rules, things you need to keep in mind when you have an AR versus just a regular bolt gun.
I hate this discussion because when you look at the laws, it is so stupid. But since you asked, I will go over a few things. So when it comes to an AR being a pistol, typically it'll be a platform that has a barrel that's less than 16 inches, and it does not have a stock on it. So you see some kind of fringe things, like we sell a few Daniel Defenses, a few Armalite's, and other rifles there with a 14.5-inch barrel that has a pinned and welded muzzle device. So that brings the legal definition up to 16. So that still counts as a rifle.
So if the barrel length is under 16, if it's a pin and welded either flash hider, muzzle brake, or some sort of accessory, I guess.
Yeah, that counts as barrel length when it's pinned and welded.
Okay. So now is that something you're going to get from a manufacturer, or can you take it to a gunsmith?
Both.
Okay. So if you say I bought that pistol, and I wanted it to be a rifle, I can take it to a gunsmith, tell them what I want on it, they pin and weld it, and now that's then classified as a rifle.
I think you can move in that direction. You can start with a pistol, and you can build it into a rifle. Can you? This is one of those things where I really want the what's that word? I need to mention this is not legal advice. So I'm not here being.
Yeah, I'm not looking for what the law says per verbatim, but I am interested, since you deal with this every day. What are some things people should look out for?
And it's constantly changing too, as a disclaimer as well.
Yeah,
it's constantly changing.
We're filming this. What's today? August 2nd.
Yep.
So later this month, we should be hearing more information about ATF's pistol brace ruling. Now, this is right now not a stock. It is a pistol brace. It's designed so that your arm goes through it. It straps to your forearm, and then you hold the pistol like this. Almost call it a rifle. You hold it like this with one hand, with which ATF's regulation as to what is a handgun it specifies that it is designed to be fired with one hand, which is pretty stupid. I mean, I hate this conversation. The ATF is a bunch of dumbasses. So, but that is one thing that you need to consider. Now, when it comes to a pinned and welded muzzle device, we typically see that when you have barrel lengths that are closer to 16. Because if you have a 10, 5, or 11-inch like the SIG that you've got here, you'd have to add a pretty significant muzzle device to get to the legal 16-inch length. So you typically see that with 13.5, 14.5-inch barrels with a pinned and welded muzzle device. And you got to be selective on that, because especially if you want to go suppressed, you would have to pin and weld the muzzle device that your suppressor will go onto.
Okay, so the flash hider, for example, I have the Sandman S that I have ordered for that, and I'm currently in the waiting tank for that.
So in this case, it wouldn't really benefit you to pin and weld that on, because you're not going to get to 16 anyway.
Right.
But if this was a 14.5, legally speaking, you would need to pin and weld that to make it a 16-inch barrel, and thus still maintain its rifle status.
And then for anyone listening, this is the AR I got. It's the SIG M400 Tread, an 11.5-inch barrel. I've got my accessories on there. And again, that suppressor, when that comes in, that's going to primarily live on that.
Yeah. Let's go over what else you have on it.
Sure.
The brace is an SB-A3, which is one of my favorite braces. You got a Holosun 512 on it, a Magpul AFG, and a Surefire Scout. What, a 1,000 lumen
Yeah,
light?
1,000 lumen.
With a rail grabber switch, which temporarily is just kind of zip tied on here because you don't have a pick rail yet, but definitely good enough for now. And the only thing I would say, yes, put your suppressor on it when that gets all worked out. And then, of course, Geisley SSA.
Yeah, the trigger, from everything I've gathered, the trigger on those are pretty decent out the gate, or am I wrong?
It's a standard GI trigger that's a little bit nicer than average. So, I mean,
But could be better.
It could be better. I mean, it's just one of those points where I'm actually thankful that they didn't try to put something that's nicer than a standard GI, because it's going to get swapped out anyway unless it started life with a Geisley in it already.
Right.
So I'm okay that they put a standard trigger in there, because a lot of people are going to change that out for something different that they want anyway, which is more subjective. So I'm fine with them putting that in there because it keeps the price down. But yeah, it's definitely a nice setup for sure.
Yeah, so also touching on that, speaking of the trigger, so the trigger, I obviously would like to get the Geisley because I have someone here in the shop that keeps telling me that Geisley is only.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, whatever that means. So what I want to do is I want to fire it, get used to it the way it is now, because I've already got quite a lot of money put in the accessories.
Yeah.
Just as much, if not more, or close to, than the actual pistol itself.
That is how it be.
Yeah.
Yep.
So my whole thing is, the reason why I chose the Tread is, I mean, it's got a lot of reviews. A lot of people seem to really like it. I just wanted a good get-started system that was proven, and the Tread is proven.
Yeah.
It may not be the highest up on the chart. I mean, looking at some of the other brands that we carry in form of AR, but it's got a lot of good reviews. ARs are customizable, so starting off with something like that, I can do whatever I want, triggers and everything. But I have not got a trigger for it yet, just because my pocketbook is still a little bruised after getting all the accessories. So I'm going to wait a little while, but I definitely will be changing that trigger out.
And that's a good route to take, because you definitely don't want to skimp out on some of the other stuff, like getting a nice optic, a really nice weapon light. These are all things that come first instead of upgrading the trigger, because as this weapon sits, it's functional right now. Putting a Geisley in it first would, I think, have been the wrong route.
Right.
So put your optic on it, put your light on it, and then you can start to upgrade the little bits on the rifle.
Yeah.
But right now it's functional, so I think you've done a great job with getting this set up, because if you have some pile of money that you'd like to dedicate towards a weapon, you pretty much have to take about a third of that for the actual weapon itself.
Right. So when I was actually, before I bought that and built it, I had a budget set aside. I knew everything was going to cost me.
Yep.
I got the rifle. I actually got all the accessories and bought those before I got my hands on the rifle, because I knew no matter what system I was going to go with, it was going to fit on to my next AR or my first AR. But I want to talk about suppressors. So suppressors, because I put that into my budget, the Sandman is very expensive. Actually, the Sandman is just about as much as, maybe a little less than the weapon itself.
Yeah, what are they, about $1,000?
Somewhere between 8,000 and 1,000.
8,000.
Yeah,
Definitely
Sandmans are right around 800, 900, and then if you're looking for, like me with my Geisley, I'm running a Geisley URGI clone. So I already got the Surefire fast attach on it. So I'm gonna go Surefire SOCOM. That's what I'm gonna do on mine.
Yeah,
I know you're on the same boat as mine. As me with the SOCOMs.
Yeah, but
so the M400 that I bought is actually on our site. It's marked down to $949.99.
it's a solid price.
So by the time I got the tax stamp with the suppressor, I'm paying more for that than I am the rifle.
Yeah, then you add an optic, a light, grip, a couple extra mags.
Optic, you're looking $300 to $500, entry level to intermediate level. Of course, I added the grip on there, which wasn't too bad because I wanted it to be comfortable. I'm not going to want to shoot it if it's not comfortable.
Yeah, grips. I mean, you might find yourself having 72 different grips over the next.
Because you're never going to know until you're shooting it and you feel it.
I settled, because I used to run this as well. I settled on the BCM. What the heck is that thing called? It's a little like hook looking thing.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a hand stop.
Pretty much,
Is it the Carve?
No, I'm getting torn
That's
apart.
from Rail Grabber. I'm thinking that's what I have ordered.
someone's going to know what I'm talking about. It's on my Mark 18. If you've seen some of our videos, you'll notice it. CAG, that's it. The CAG. The CAG. Okay. That's what I settled on, because when I'm using now, speaking of grips, you can't put a vertical grip on a handgun.
Okay, explain that.
So this is not a vertical grip per ATF. And I know on that camera right there, I do want to mention, it looks like I'm pointing this right at Luke's head.
But it's not. I'm back here.
It's forward a bit, so we're good. So the law says you cannot put a vertical grip on a handgun.
Okay.
Now, doing so would turn it into an NFA item, so
okay.
$200 stamp and all that nonsense. There is a text of that law that says if your weapon is a certain overall length or greater, you can. So, like, if we collapse this thing down and we take off the muzzle device here, and I want to say 26 inches, maybe?
Yes.
If it's 26 inches or greater and still defined as a handgun, you can put a vertical grip on it. Not many guns will qualify for that, but so that's why I was looking at the other sort of angled or hand stop type things there. So just something to think about, that way you don't accidentally give yourself a felony.
Nobody likes it when you accidentally felonize yourself.
We've all done stuff, but it's one of those things where it illustrates how stupid these laws are.
Yep.
And how stupid ATF
saving lots of lives with these bits of plastic.
Totally. But anyway,
so
that's the information.
Okay. So touching more on suppressor and trying to keep this conversation going.
Yep.
The suppressor, once I get it, can you walk me through kind of what changes on a pistol versus shooting it the way it is now? And then once I put a suppressor on it, what are some things that I might encounter?
This is going to be true of rifles as well,
okay.
Not just pistols. But to answer your question, when you put a suppressor on, most all suppressors are going to add back pressure to your gas system.
Okay.
So, and you can gauge that by a couple methods. The most obvious is the case ejection. Now, on an AR, a well-gassed rifle is going to kick that casing out between 3 and 4 o'clock. So if I'm facing you like this, anywhere from right here to about here, if the case
so you want it to go back
a little bit.
So if there's a clock on top of your rifle.
Yeah, if your muzzle is noon and your buttstock is 6.
Okay, that clears it up.
Yeah. So one thing that you want to watch for, though, especially if you have a weapon with a gas block that you can adjust, which, can you do this one? Maybe. If it's past 4 o'clock, closer to 5 and 6, it can't be 6, of course, but if it's further on than about 4:30, it's under gassed a little bit. Now, if it's forward of 3 o'clock, it's a little bit over gassed. Now, what I do is, especially if I have a gas block or a gas tube, something that I can adjust, I will fire the weapon without the suppressor, and I'll try and keep the case ejection right at about 3 to 4 o'clock. And then I'll put the suppressor on and see where that moves. Most of the time, it's going to be overgassed, but it's still going to be safely overgassed. It's not going to be too much, because you still want it to be able to function unsuppressed. Because if you set it up to kick the casing out at 3 or 4 o'clock when the rifle is suppressed, when you take the can off, you're lowering the pressure in the gas system that could affect the operation of the rifle. So with that, I will optimize it for unsuppressed, and then when I put a suppressor on it, it just is what it is at that point. If I can find a happy medium, great, but that gun needs to operate when it's really dirty, using bad ammunition, and when it's unsuppressed. So those are all conditions that would matter to you. So, like, when it comes to the ammunition thing, we can touch on this later, but some ammos are not going to be as high pressure as others. So that involves testing your ammunition as well. But it also kicks back a lot of that carbon gas into your face.
Right.
It comes out through the ejection port, but it also comes through near the charging handle, because there's a gap right here. And the gases will come through there and they get in your eyes. It's really, really aggravating. There are some gas systems out there. There are bolt carrier groups, and there are charging handles that are meant to kind of seal that up or direct that into a safe direction. So that's one thing to think about. If you shoot suppressed and you're getting a little bit too much gas in the face, you can tame that. I would say that the charging handle is the cheapest thing to change out first. But just one of those things to pay attention to, I'd say.
Yeah.
All right. So let's touch more on the gas systems because there's more than one.
Yeah.
Starting with direct impingement, which is what that is.
Your SIG, yeah.
Yep. Can you kind of tell me, the gas systems and how they operate? I mean, is it a vast thing? I'm not sure how many there are.
There's pretty much there's two main designs.
Yeah, most of your common ARs that you're going to be able to go out and buy on the shelf are these two.
Either direct gas or a short stroke piston.
Okay, so what are the differences?
So direct gas, like your SIG here, there's a hole on top of the barrel, of course. So some of the gas, the bullet goes past that hole, and then there's still tens of thousands of PSI in the bore after the bullet passes. So some of that gas is then bled through that hole, through a tube, and then it goes into your bolt carrier. It unlocks the bolt, and it forces the carrier back into the spring in the buffer tube here, and then it forces that bolt back into chamber the next round after ejecting the casing.
Right.
So the good parts about direct gas is that it is often the lightest, the simplest, the cheapest, and the most accurate. People will say that it's the dirtiest, which it is dirtier than piston, especially if you shoot suppressed. But I think that the negatives of direct gas have been worked out for most quality rifles.
Yeah, if you're talking your $1,200-$1,300 AR, they've got it pretty well cleaned up.
The size of the hole on top of the barrel, combined with the length of the gas tube, all of that little fiddling that manufacturers have done since the AR was invented, really, all that's been pretty well worked out. And as long as you have a quality rifle, that sucker's going to run. So to me, direct gas is fine because it's also the easiest to swap parts out as well. So a lot of piston ARs have their own bespoke operating system, like HK and LWRC and FN's not an AR, but you know what I mean.
Right.
So piston guns do have the advantage, and I've actually got CZ Bren 2 here. This is piston operated, of course, and we shot this in a video a few months ago. I had it with my Surefire suppressor on. It did not have near as much gas in my face as my Mark 18 for the reasons that I mentioned just now and in that video. But when it comes to a piston, you have the advantage of the actual gases that come out of the barrel are not then redirected into its own bolt. So the old adage was an AR is throwing up in its own mouth, basically. Whereas this, you capture the energy of that gas, and that pushes a piston, which cycles the receiver or cycles the bolt.
Okay.
So that's the advantage there. It's cleaner, it's cooler, and the downsides are it's heavier, it's on average a little bit less accurate, and you have that bespoke gas system for each brand, really. Okay. But when it comes to rifles that are not quite ARs, like this Bren or like an AK, like the Scars and that sort of thing, we see a lot of piston on those.
Yeah.
All right, so I appreciate you explaining that to me because, again, I'm learning all of this, hence today's episode.
Yeah.
So I'm taking my own notes. So moving on.
You just did this episode just so you
I did it for myself.
Yeah, so
I wanted this episode.
Yeah,
so
anyway, go on.
I'm sure there's other people out there. They just don't know what to do. So we're going to go through it today. Let's talk about ammunition now.
Yes.
So I know you can get ARs. A popular caliber people like to get is .223 Wild. You can shoot your .223 Wild, Remingtons, and 5.56. So what I had gotten, I was actually the system. I call it the system. The AR I was looking at before this was actually a .223 Wild.
Yep.
I didn't know. I just knew. Oh, that's one more caliber I could shoot. So if you could break down .223 Wild, Remington, and 5.56, the main three, and tell me first of all, why are there differences if they all come out of the same rifle? And what purposes or applications would you use for those calibers? It's like shooting target, home defense.
Yeah.
What caliber would you want to use and why?
So to kick this off, let's address 223 Wild.
Okay.
223 Wild is not so much a caliber.
It's a chamber.
It's a chamber.
Okay, so what's the difference?
So when you take a 223 chamber, that is going to be dimensioned in such a way where the tolerances are fairly tight.
Yep.
Right? Because it's going to be most accurate for the commercial market.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to a 5.56 chamber, the military chamber, the chamber dimensions there are designed to be a little bit looser.
Mass-produced.
Mass-produced.
Okay.
That way you can run dirty ammunition. It's a bit safer in that way. It's a bit more reliable when you look at all the – I mean, war is hell.
With the 5.56, that's the design of that chamber is to put hundreds of thousands of rounds till the barrel pretty much melts out. So you can just build the carbon up, and it's still going to run like a workhorse.
So it kind of gives you a little bit more clearance in the chamber?
It does. It's a little, dare I say, sloppier than a 223 chamber in that regard to make it more reliable for carbon buildup like you wouldn't believe, dirty ammo, just
higher pressures.
Yes. Yeah. So the downside of that is it doesn't ring out the optimum accuracy.
We're talking about the 223 Wild still.
Where 5.56 is the loosest and on average the least accurate chamber.
Okay.
Yep.
But it's the most reliable that can take the most different types of ammunition, different manufacturers, different years, different clean, dirty, hot, cold.
Brass, steel casing, anything.
Yeah. So it gives up the utmost in precision for reliability.
Okay.
223 is the other way around.
Okay.
223 Wild is a chamber that's kind of in the middle. It tightens up the 5.56 chamber a little bit, but it's still, on average, more accurate than it, but it can still shoot 5.56.
Right.
When you're talking ARs, if it says 223 on the side, they say you should not shoot 5.56 in it because 5.56 ammunition is a different sort of pressure. It's a higher pressure, and I think the casings can be just a smidge.
Yeah, it has to do with pressures and head spacing. I want to say it's like 10,000 psi difference.
Yeah, 10,000 is a bit.
It's substantial when you're talking pressures.
Yeah, it's about 20%.
Yeah.
So a 223 AR, they're actually not too common anymore. I don't think we carry a single AR that is actually 223. Most on the market you'll see are either straight up 5.56 like Daniel Defense or something like 223 Wild.
Like a Seekins.
Yeah.
Seeking something along those lines.
Yeah.
You're seeing more guys going away from chambering ARs in 223 Remington just for the sole fact of now with the high success of the Wiley chamber, good to go.
Wild. Anyway, so when it comes to that, though, speaking of Seekins, speaking of DD, I own both of those brands when it comes to ARs. I have a Seekins barrel in my Mark 12, and I have that Mark 18 Daniel Defense 10.3, and I also have a 14.5-inch DD barrel in one of my rifles. With 77 grain match ammo, I just did a group like 2 weeks ago. It was flirting with half MOA. I think it was like 5/8 MOA. Now, with just normal 55 grain 5.56, that was around 3/4 MOA out of an AR with a 1-8 on it. You know, like that is still very accurate.
That's impressive.
It's more than good enough for the purposes of that rifle. So when it really comes down to it, though, for a defensive rifle, it doesn't really matter to me whether it says 5.56 or 223 Wild on it because it's still going to be accurate enough and it's going to be reliable. So,
okay, so I want to ask this for my own setup, my own AR, because it's not a 223 Wild, it's a REM and 5.56. So let's pretend that it shoots 223 Wild and everything else. Are there applications for one over the other? Like, would I want to use one, like a 223 for target, home defense, versus 5.56 for the other?
Typically, your 223 is a little bit cheaper than what 5.56 is.
And this is REM.
This is 223 REM.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your 223 Remington is going to be a little bit cheaper than your 5.56. So, like, for me, with my AR, I'm running a Geisley 5.56. I have a URGI clone. So with the 223, I have a stockpile of that I can go to the range, practice, everything like that. And then I have my 5.56, my full house 5.56, 62 grain green tip that I have for defensive settings.
Green tip for defense?
That's what I got. It's what I could get my hands on, and it was a good price.
You need to sort that out. You don't want green tip.
So
we can touch on that. I mean,
outside,
what's the big deal with green tip?
My whole plan on this is not to be used inside the house. I have others for in the house.
Before Luke pulls out a knife and stabs me, here's why. Green tip the bullet itself is not just a copper jacketed lead core like most bullets. It has a steel rod inside of it.
Okay.
That is to penetrate deeper than your standard full metal jacket ball ammunition.
Which expands upon impact.
Correct.
Yes. What makes the 5.56 or 2.23 or whatever, what makes that a very effective round for defense is because it deforms, it splits into pieces. It is very effective because it goes inside the soft target and it changes direction and it breaks up. Now, a 62 grain green tip is not going to come apart. It's just going to drill straight through.
Okay.
So it's not transferring that energy into the target.
I see.
So when it comes to the uses for green tip, it's more so a military application when you're trying to shoot through light obstacles and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Or light body armor.
Gotcha.
I think it's good to have green tip. There are some instances where, like, a police officer might carry green tip if he has to shoot through a car windshield, for example. I think green tip,
because it'll keep that trajectory strong,
yes. Yep.
rather than impacting and diverting the direction.
Exactly. Okay. That's the word, fragmenting. So green tip for defense, I personally do not advise.
Okay.
It's what I could get my hands on.
Well, you have no excuse now because ammunition's out.
It's starting to come back. So
now, what some people will do is actually they'll run self-defense or varmint ammunition because that is designed even more so than your standard 5.56 to actually fragment and mushroom out and all that. Because the military, per the laws of war, you can't use hollow point or expanding ammo.
Okay.
So that's all they got. But we aren't bound to the same rules. So I would say a good setup for a defensive rifle like that for the house or whatever is to consider using specific self-defense expanding ammunition.
Especially, I'm not sure if you guys, because I wasn't in on the home defense episode, but I'm sure especially with fragmenting, it's better for inside the house because you don't want to be going into different rooms.
Yeah, and when it comes to shooting inside the house in a defensive situation, there's a lot that needs looked over, and that just comes down to the practice, which we'll get to here in a few minutes.
Okay. Well, thanks for clearing that up. Moving along with ammunition, I want to talk about magazines. Specifically, what types of mag, storage of ammunition, whether that be in the mag, in an ammo can. What are some practices if you just now own an AR and you're going to start stockpiling your ammo, or start acquiring. That's the word I was looking for. Start acquiring ammo.
What, is stockpile a sensitive word?
Well, in this day and age, it could be a sensitive word tomorrow.
We're past that now, man. We can use the word stockpile.
Okay, so you want to get a bunch of ammo for your AR.
Yes.
What's your process, Derek, for handling all that ammo?
Well, I keep most of the ammo loose in cans, ammo cans. If it's match ammunition, like I have a bunch of 77 grain, I'll keep those in their boxes in a can as well. But if it's just your standard 55 grain stuff, that's just loose in cans. It's the most dense way of storing it.
Okay.
I will keep a number of magazines loaded, fully loaded. I don't subscribe to the, it wears out the spring stuff, that BS that we've heard from boomers and forums and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So right now I have my plate carriers at home with 6 loaded mags in it, fully loaded. A battle belt with 2 loaded mags in it. A London Bridge chest rig with a few mags in there as well. Depending on the situation, if you need something, it's right there. I don't keep everything loaded, but I keep a reserve of ammunition in whatever I need to grab or use. There's enough ammunition right there to do what I need to do right there. And that sounds over the top. It sounds paranoid. It sounds ridiculous, but that's just how I have it. And it's
because it's one of those things where it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
It's casual. I just put it all together and just leave it there.
Yep.
You don't need to go LARPing around with it, but it's good to have it. I don't subscribe to leaving your mags empty to not wear out the spring. I don't subscribe to the loading it with 28 rounds because loading it with 30 rounds makes it harder to insert into the rifle. I'd say, you know what the antidote to that is? If you load your rifle on a closed bolt with a full mag, put it in there, seat it, hit that thing.
Yeah, they're tools. They're meant to be.
Stop being soft.
Yeah, you're not going to hurt them.
A good rifle, you won't even need to really do that too much. But I'm pretty tired of people who aren't treating their weapons like tools.
Yeah.
Don't baby it. It's a machine. It's made to run way harder than you will ever run it.
Yeah, because these things have been designed and kept to standards for military application. You're talking dust, water,
drops,
all kinds of horrible, like anything you could put that rifle through. Yeah. So as a regular civilian, you're likely not going to put that through any worse damage than what it was actually designed for.
Not even close. But it's good to have that capacity. Like in the same way that you're wearing a watch that can go 200 feet underwater. When are you ever going to be 200 feet underwater?
Right.
Never.
If I am, I'm probably not concerned about the time.
You'll probably be dead by
exactly.
now. Yeah. But the thing is, if you want to go in a pool or you want to go for a swim, it's going to be fine because it's nowhere close to the mechanical limit of it. But it drives me up a wall that people want to use what the military uses, or they use the military as inspiration for their products, but they don't want to rise to the level of training necessary to effectively use the weapon.
And they baby him.
Like this, hit it
the kind of people
hammer.
that will buy a military style something or other, like a scope, say for example, and then call in and complain because it had a ring mark because it was tested at the manufacturer.
Night Force, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
if you want what they have, it's going to be tested.
Yes, just.
We'll take a break here for you, Derek.
I'll let my blood pressure come down. We'll be okay. Anyway, I want to touch on one thing with the ammo real quick that I forgot to mention.
Okay.
You had mentioned, what do you use? What do you have? 223, 556.
Yeah, for range versus home defense and all that.
Because 223 is typically cheaper, 223 is kept for practice.
Okay.
And just dicking around and that sort of thing. 556, all those magazines that I mentioned in my carrier, my chest rig, my belt, that's all 556.
So loose in a can is your 223 RAM.
Yeah, and if I want to go to the range, I'll load up a few mags for that day, and then that'll be it.
Yep.
Now, 223 is not going to run as high a pressure. So when you are doing things like setting up your gas system, if you have a gas block that you can adjust, all that sort of stuff, you would need to be mindful of
what you're running.
Yeah. But also, do you ever say something on YouTube that you really regret saying, that you look back on it and like, why the hell did I say that?
I feel like you have.
Yeah. I feel like I have, yeah. So in our Christensen video, we did it was the CA556.
Okay. That was a popular video. That was one of our first ones we did.
God, of course. It was one of the first ones, and I did say the cliche, if it doesn't run steel, it doesn't deserve brass.
Yeah.
I want to clarify a few things on that. Because I feel like an ass for saying that, because when it comes to shooting steel is fine. It's not going to damage your gun.
Yep. Shooting steel casings, not
steel,
shooting steel targets, steel casings.
Steel casing. We'll get to target. Shooting steel casings is fine. It's not going to wear out your extractor. It's not going to wear out your chamber, all that nonsense. What it is, though, in most cases, it is undercharged. It's a weak powder load in that case.
Okay.
It's just cheaper that way. If you can get away with using 10% less gunpowder or whatever it is, or a crappier gunpowder, it saves money at the factory. And a lot of this stuff being Russian-made, that's kind of what they do. But because those rounds are not as high pressure as your standard 5.56, it might not have enough oomph in it to cycle the weapon.
Right.
So that's where you get some of the steel is unreliable nonsense. It comes down to that.
So it has less powder.
It's less powder, or
pressure smaller.
Yeah, the pressure is lower. Yeah. And most, like I have some Tula 223, and that's just if I want to go where it doesn't really matter what I'm shooting or how far for accuracy. When none of that matters, or if like my friend wants to shoot my rifle a little bit, okay, here's some cheap stuff. That that's
mag
what
dump.
I use that for. Yeah, mag dump. Get out of here.
All All right, so now here's the heart of the conversation.
Yep.
This is what I really want to get into because as a responsible AR owner, I want I want to be able to go out, use it effectively, use it safely. So I know with a bolt gun, I could take it out and I can set targets up and plink all day long and then have a great time. I can learn a lot of stuff. I can practice with dope and windage and all that stuff. So with an AR, because I've never owned one, I've never gone out and shot one. I've actually only shot 2 ARs in my life. One was that 5.56 that we had. I actually shot once when we were out. And then I think I shot one of Bainey's ARs. But it was never like a full day. I don't know much about it.
Right.
My question is, once you have an AR, what is some good training I'm not talking going to a training class, but just you yourself going out. What are some things that you want to use or have with you? It's like steel targets. How many should you have? What type should you have?
Right.
So like, what's it look like for the person that buys an AR and now they want to go out and shoot it, and they're by themselves and they want to get used to it. What are some things that you could kind of recommend for them?
The overall thing I'd say is start small.
Okay.
You don't need to get a whole bunch of expensive stuff right off the bat. In the same way that when you're getting into shooting or reloading or whatever it is you do, when you're trying something new, you don't just go and spend $1,000 on stuff if you can avoid it. So when it comes to, if you're training for personal defense, a lot of that's going to be very close range. So cardboard targets are good for that. I made some cardboard holders. You'll see them in the Vectronics Cody video that we did.
Okay.
I just took some beams of wood that are probably like 1/2 by 1.5 inches or so.
Yeah.
I made like an H-frame sort of frame thing,
Okay.
and then I just stapled some cardboard to it.
That's all that mine
and then
are too.
And then I just screwed some 1/2 inch wide pieces of PVC to the bottom. That way I can nail down some rebar into the ground and then just place it on that.
Okay.
So and all that combined with the rebar, I made 3 targets for like $20.
Yeah.
So it's not too bad.
So you don't need to go out and get a steel target and
No.
start hammering that. So what's the range look like for the?
And especially, too, if we're talking home defense, I just bought this AR for home defense. Most of the distance that you're going to want to be practicing at,
Yeah,
not shooting steel at.
He was just mentioning that. I'd say, I mean, look at how far will the distances be inside your house. If you have a hallway that's, say, 15 yards long, I mean, I would keep your practice to around that. Call it 25 and in. And when it comes to shooting .223 on steel, having quality steel is important. I'd say you don't want to shoot mild steel because that bullet's going to crater and that can redirect that bullet in a very unsafe direction. AR 500 steel is fine. AR 550, if you can get it, is less likely to crater because at close range, even AR 500, you're going to start causing little dimples in it. But just to be safe, what would you say, 50 yards?
I have never shot a piece of steel with a centerfire cartridge under 50 yards.
I have. I do not advise it.
Yeah.
So let me put you in a scenario because in my head, before we had this conversation, I was just trying to think of like what it would look like if I take it out to a range and try to get some realistic ranges. So what I was thinking is obviously there's home defense, which is going to be close call. But another thing about me getting this AR versus an actual longer rifle is I'm not worried about long range with it.
Right.
But I would like to maximize the effective range of it. So let's say up to 100 yards, no more than 150 yards. That's really pushing it. But I think 100 yards for me is a good range. I would like to know how good can I be at 25 yards to 50 to 75 and then do 100 yards.
Pretty much what you should do is, at first, just to keep it cheap, do some dry fire. That is, and when people train, a lot of people make the mistake of keeping it too, what's the word, structured, too stiff?
Regimented.
Regimented?
Yeah, I would say regimented is a good word for a lot of the videos you see out there for training purposes and everything like that.
So when you have to use your weapon defensively, you're not going to have a lot of time on your hands. So being able to take your weapon from however you're holding it, seeing a target, identifying it as a threat, and bringing it up to engage, that time needs to be trained to be shortened as quick as possible.
So that should be the first thing you should really train on is, what would you call that? Your
pretty much bringing the gun on target.
Yeah.
Target acquisition.
Acquisition, there you go.
Yeah. So a lot of people will do dry fire in their house where they'll pick a spot on the wall, or they'll put something there like a little sticky, and then they'll go from like a low ready, and then they'll bring it up, and then they'll squeeze their trigger when it's on target. So that muscle memory of bringing that gun up is going to matter later on.
Okay.
So that's a good way to start without sinking a bunch of
You have
money
to buy
into it.
anything then.
Exactly.
A sling maybe, but
Yeah.
you should have a sling anyway.
You should, yeah, and make sure your gun's empty.
Yes.
Just stop it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but
And with doing the whole dry firing thing, it's going to help better your mechanics, such as, and especially too, coming from like the world that I came from, I was bolt gun. I've shot a ton of bolt gun. And here recently, I've owned an AR before, but then I sold it, and then I just bought another one here again this year. But it's been a hot minute since
wisely is only.
It's been a hot minute since I've shot. So it's the same thing too, is being able to practice, to be familiar with the weapon system of going, okay, here's mag change, target acquisition, to be smooth but not regimented, because every scenario you're going to come into is going to be different.
Exactly.
So you want to be smooth in your subconscious as to how you acquire the target, what's your low ready position, what's your sling position, because that's a whole conversation we could probably do a podcast on, is how do you carry your rifle?
Yeah, that's
Yeah, we're already getting pretty late into this, so that does sound like a can of worms. Maybe that's something we can touch on later.
we'll press on.
Yeah, but exactly, that's a whole can of worms that me and Derek could go into way into depth. But for just, I bought my AR, I want to go out and shoot. That's the same thing too, is getting paper target, starting off dry firing, becoming familiar with the weapon, going out, starting at 25, 50 yards with paper, because you can actually go out, count your number of shots that are hits. You can tape them real easily. You can just get a piece of Scotch tape so you know where you're at. You can check your groupings, everything like that. And then once you proficient, well, I wanted to say master, but I can say master. Once you've mastered that skill of getting small groups, fast target acquisition, fast engagements, then you can start branching out and start stretching the limits, because once you hone in that skill, it's going to be better as you expand over distance. And that's something that I run into the issue with, is being a long-range shooter bolt gun. I want to grab my 11.5-inch Geisley and go, I want to shoot this sucker out at 200 yards and see what I can hit.
Yeah.
We did that when we were shooting. We did that video on the Vortex 6X magnifier on my Mark 18. Apart from like one or two shots, all my groups offhand at 200 were that.
But again, that's not the purpose of why I got that rifle.
When it comes to defense, you want to get as many rounds on target as quickly as you can. If you do that, you're gonna win. Now, what a lot of people do is they practice too slow, or they practice too few rounds. Or one thing that annoys me a little bit is they'll put too much emphasis on 2 shots out of their rifle, slinging that and bringing their pistol up. Okay, like that's fine. It's good to practice that. But
I feel like you'd have to master both of those separately before you really want to train with both.
Yeah,
correct.
That's a little bit on the advanced side of things. But my gripe with that is, if you do that too much, you're going to build a muscle memory that has you putting your rifle down after only 2 shots.
Yeah.
And something like that happened with me when I went from pump shotguns to semi-auto. My first semi-auto that I shot, I wanted to pump.
And that delayed you.
And what the hell am I doing? You know, so that just shows how much muscle memory can really matter when you're not thinking, because you're not thinking.
You have to fight it in those situations, and when you're fighting it, then you're slow.
So basically, what I would say is, see how fast you can put your rounds on target. Now, speed is usually the inverse of accuracy, and distance makes that worse. So if you're firing as fast as you can on like a torso-sized target, and you want to hit within about an 8-inch circle at 50 yards, you're probably going to be a shot every second, half second, something like that. If you move that same 8-inch target to a more realistic distance, say 10 yards, you could almost just hammer down as fast as you can go, and you'll find most of those rounds on target. Okay. So when you're practicing, practice your speed, but also find that cadence that you can still be on target, because it's not just getting rounds down range as such, and you have to be honest with your acceptable levels of accuracy, because at close range, on a defensive level, the the standard for accuracy is not high. The target is very large for how close it is.
Right. Minute of bad guy. That's
minute of bad guy up close is it's a big target. So what you
like shooting a door.
Yeah. So
it's right in front of you.
Yeah. So I mean, practicing your target acquisition, your speed of your shooting, and such is going to matter first.
Okay.
Then I would say then you can start getting into your reloads. Then start getting into your if you have a jam of some sort, what do you do? And you can induce that. You can drop a spent casing into your bolt area right here, and then chamber around and get yourself a double feed or something like that. You can cause a failure, a malfunction that you can then address.
Right.
So stuff like that is going to matter. But I think a lot of people see what Garantham's doing and T-Rex and all that sort of stuff, and those guys are incredibly competent with their weapons.
And they've spent hours and hours and hours training.
It's literally their job.
It's Correct. Their job, yeah. But I want people to be selective about who they get inspiration from, who they. I'll be the first to say I'm not an authority on weapon training as such. I know what I've done. I've taken a few classes here and there, but what I'm here to say is be selective with who you listen to and pretty much how you go through it. Think it through. Is what I'm being told by this person on YouTube, is this making sense to me? And if it's not, then pursue it. See if it's something that's worth following or not.
Yeah. Well, before we get deeper into it, let's talk about the zeroing distance of an AR. So what does that look like?
It depends on your goals, really. But when it comes to an AR pistol for defensive use, it's not a problem if you want to zero that thing at 25 yards. Because at the typical defensive ranges that you're dealing with, if you need to go 0 to 50, hold center mass or upper center mass, and you're going to hit where you need to. You're going to make an effective hit. But it doesn't matter a huge ton. It just really doesn't.
For defensive, you don't need to hold a certain MOA. You just need to be able to contact that target.
Yeah, you just need to connect.
Yeah.
But my Mark 18 is zeroed at 40 yards, and that puts me back on at 200. It being a 10.5-inch barrel, the velocity is a little low. If you compare that to like a 16-inch barrel, you'd run a 50/200 yard zero because that bullet is coming up to meet the plane of the optic at 50. It's peaking at about 160, and then it's coming back down to meet the optic plane at 200.
Right.
Now, the shorter you make that first distance, the longer your second distance is going to be, but the bigger your vertical spread is going to be between the distances. So my other rifle is zeroed at 33 yards, and that puts me right dead on at 300 because that's a longer range rifle. It's a 14.5-inch barrel with a 1:8 scope on it. That's more relevant to that. But when it comes to something like this, zero it at whatever distance you deem necessary, but then practice, see what that bullet's doing at different ranges.
Right.
So if you're trying to optimize it for inside the house, that's totally fine. You can rock a 10, 15-yard zero if you want to, but shoot it at 25, 50, 75, 100 and see what that bullet's doing, because the closer you make your first zero, the bigger the difference is going to be downrange. So if you have a 15-yard zero, that bullet might be a foot high at 100.
Yeah.
So that could matter to you.
I've got 2-3 more things to touch on, and I'm just going to bring this up now because I don't know when I want a good spot. Maybe when we start talking about accessories. But with training and with ammo and everything, I know you run a 22 bolt carrier group in your Mark 18.
Yeah.
So, and can you explain to people listening and watching why you do that?
The short answer is cost savings and safety. And I do some training at my buddy's house, which you can shoot unsuppressed full power there if you want to, 5.56. But it's one of those like, okay, there's a certain courtesy to your neighbors that we would like to follow. So, whoops, there we go. But 22 is incredibly quiet, and it's very cheap.
Right.
And it doesn't have the safety considerations that 5.56 would because it's only going 2 miles an hour, right? So what a 22 conversion kit is you take out your bolt carrier group in your AR and you replace it with one that'll make it shoot 22. Up front, it'll have what looks like just a casing of a 223 5.56 round, and that pretty much shoots a 22 round through that, so it's 2 inches of free bore, and then it goes into the rifling of your AR. Now it's 223. It's the same bore size as 22, so it's able to fit and function there safely without being too high pressure, too low pressure. It's not going to be the most accurate, I'd say, with that 2 inches of free bore and the twist rate being twice as fast as what a normal 22 is. You're not going to be planting small groups with it. But if you're trying to do close range practice, it's a good way to get some live fire in for cheap.
Right.
So I do like it. I do try and sprinkle that in with a healthy mix of live fire just to get the recoil management and that sort of thing that you can only get with normal center fire. But 22 does teach you a lot of those benefits that you can probably get 90% of your training's worth with 22. And I'd say it's better to shoot 1,000 rounds of 22 through your AR than 100 rounds of 5.56. You learn so much more from that.
Yeah. Okay.
Just gotta clean it. It gets dirty as all hell, man.
Oh yeah.
Do you have anything that you can contribute as far as training with the AR goes that people should know right out the gate as a first-time AR owner?
First-time AR owner, be honest with what you need out of it first, and then you can set up your training regimen around that. There's no point in training at 300 yards and doing the utmost in precision if you're just training for home defense.
Right.
So set your standards. Be honest with yourself, and when you actually start to do live fire, make sure that you keep it somewhat structured. Some people will film themselves, and they'll look at it and they'll say, okay, my form is a little bit off here. How can I improve this? Recoil management, finding your footwork is important. A lot of people, when they're new to shooting just in general, when they're standing up, they'll be standing up as if they're just standing in line at a grocery store. They don't take an athletic stance to shoot with, because a lot of this stuff is like, you need to be able to move as well. Because this is what he said about the being at a range and it being too structured and all that. It's difficult to find a place where you're permitted to move and shoot. It's difficult, but if you can find a place to do that, it's going to be hugely advantageous, because if you can shoot while moving left to right, forward and back, that sort of thing, that can be really, really effective, because it totally changes how you shoot, really, and it really opens you up to being less accurate with your shots if you have to move. So just get used to it,
Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is cleaning, maintenance, how to care for it. Can you kind of give an instructor's stance as to what people talk at me about how I should take care of it?
I mean, keep it clean.
Yep.
You don't need to go too crazy with it, but just keep it clean. A lot of people will just let their guns get super, super dirty, and to be honest, you probably could. You can let this gun go for thousands of rounds, and it would likely be fine. But when it comes to a defensive weapon, it's one of those things where you can't chance it. So every time you shoot, you don't need to go hog wild with it. I just drag a bore snake through the bore. I'll get some Q-tips in the chamber. I'll get a brush on the bolts and the bolt carrier and all that, and that's pretty much it. It can be simple. It can be pretty quick, but just keep it clean, because if that's the one thing that saves you in a defensive situation, that's the difference between winning and losing.
Right.
If it was just a range gun, screw it. You don't need to clean it right away. I mean, you should, but I mean, I've gone to the range and back and not clean it. It's like, hey, I'm shooting next week. I'll clean it after that one.
So if you're using that for both range and also sits for home defense, so would you want to clean it after every time you take it to the range?
I would.
As simple as just running a bore snake and oiling some things?
I mean, yeah, you're mostly focusing your efforts on the chamber and on the bolt. Bore snake, okay, whatever. That bullet's going to go down that barrel, whether it's dirty or not.
Right.
But you want to make sure that your bolt is fully closing, so there can't be carbon buildup there. and you want to make sure that it has enough, it's clean enough to cycle, for all the parts to move around and that sort of thing in there. And like I said, you could probably let this thing run for a long string of shots without cleaning it, and it's going to be fine. But like I said, what's the reward in doing that? You're taking the risk, but there's no reward.
Right.
And plus, too, then down the road when it comes time to clean it, it is a nightmare to get that clean once that carbon hardens. It is an absolute nightmare to get it clean.
It is.
Are there any certain cleaning supplies or accessories that you should look out for?
I love Bortec. I mean, I use Bortec and Hornady One Shot. Those are and everything I use. Hornady One Shot is the dry lube, and I use Bortec on just about everything.
I don't even know what the heck I use.
Wipeout's another good one. I just
use
take that.
CLP.
I
use CLP. I have some powder blaster. It's like a brake cleaner type thing where you just spray on carbon and it just comes off.
Like what do you call it? Aerosol.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what I use on my AR. Yeah. It's called Wipeout.
Yeah.
And I just spray it in there, and it's a big white foam, and then all of a sudden it turns black, and then wipe it all off.
The foam's nice for the chamber when you really want to get in there, because you can't always get all of the chamber.
Right.
But again, you talk to 20 guys, and all 20 guys are going to tell you what cleaning product's the best product.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all
but I mean, as far as material goes, you just want a simple bore cleaner, some Q-tip swabs.
I like CLP, just because it does everything in one go.
I think what but I mean, have on hand bore snake, chamber brush, Q-tips.
Go to Harbor Freight.
Yep.
They have
get jack stands.
Don't get jack stands.
Never buy a jack
Freight.
stands from Harbor Freight.
No. Go to Harbor Freight. They have a bag of differently sized Q-tip looking things.
Yeah, I've seen those.
And some
those
of those
big ones are awesome.
Yeah, and so you can really get the inside of the chamber. You can get.
They're like this.
It's a different size bag. It comes with a bunch of different ones. It's pretty cheap as well.
Yeah.
Just a few dollars. Or next time you're in your doctor's office, just gank a few of those super long Q-tips from the little cup there.
Make sure you cough into the container before you close that out too.
Yeah. But yeah, finding what you like to use. Of course, gun-specific brushes and such are usually the best. But sometimes you just find a brush that's not necessarily meant for it, but it just fits and works.
I have a brush from Bortec that's a chamber brush, so it gets into the chamber that's 223, but then it has bristle on the outside, so I can take it in and just and spin it, and it blows everything out that I need out. It's sweet.
But with that, if you clean it when it's lightly dirty, you won't need to get too invasive with that.
Correct. I have that as an oh crap, I got lazy, and I have about 1,000 rounds here, and it's all hardened.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
All right. Well, I would wrap this up, but I know everyone's favorite topic, accessories. Now, we talked about accessories, the light and all that stuff. But as far as the range goes, what are some accessories that are going to help you?
First is don't dye stuff. So iPro, and I keep an IFAC in my range bag whenever I go to the range.
Back up. You've already lost me. Don't dye stuff.
Yes.
Dye color?
Don't.
No.
As in keep yourself
Safety.
alive.
Oh,
Safety.
don't. Okay.
Safety. Okay. So
eyes and ears.
Eyes and ears for sure. Decent eyes. Like I run some Oakley ballistics. Those are real nice in case you have some kind of nasty malfunction. They're ballistically rated.
Wiley X are a little bit cheaper, and they're great as well. That's what I use.
But then I have an IFAC with just the basic sort of time-saving things like tourniquets and bleeding management stuff here and there. And just learn a little bit about that, because that's also something that you should be looking at as well when it comes to self-defense.
I'd like to do an episode on that specifically.
Which one of us is closest to a doctor? Is that Kiefer?
No.
He's a mortician.
It depends on who you ask. Kiefer could be your everything.
Yep.
A lot of people really like
Jason's was a microbiologist.
Yeah. I'm natural resource. I'm out.
I'm a meteorologist.
I'm a motorcycle mechanics.
So combined, we are not doctors. But anyway, that's a different conversation.
So what's IFAC?
Individual first aid kit.
Okay.
It's got stuff in there that is designed to basically just buy time until the ambulance comes.
Stop the bleeding.
Yep. Yeah. So, safety stuff first.
Yep.
And then things like what he had mentioned there, the type of target that you're setting up, covers for your bullet holes. A shot timer would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Knowing your times is important for the sense of progress.
Right.
So it's not something that you really need to pay that much attention to. But
no, but you can't tell how good you're getting at target acquisition unless you can put that in a frame.
Gives you a goal to work towards.
It's a way to quantify. So that's a good way to look at that. Don't really get to, oh, I want to get this to 2 seconds. Just keep on going, and then you'll notice when you plateau and try and break through that and keep going. Yep. Good shot timers are pretty expensive, so that's a later down the road thing. But
I wonder if they make an app.
They do. It's most of the apps I've messed with are kind of cack.
Yeah,
so
they don't.
We're not going to go.
We will not recommend apps then.
Not if you pay for it. No. If it's free, yeah, go ahead, try it. Who cares? But I'd say after that, it's just.
So we've got safety.
Yeah.
All your safety stuff.
Safety and quantifiers.
I think gloves are good to have because that handguard will heat up.
Are they?
Well, let me ask you.
Because what situation would you be most likely to use your weapon? Like my Mark 18 is by my bedside.
Now we're talking range.
Oh, just range.
Yeah, it's just at the range.
Just range gloves are fine, but I'm a firm believer in it's a cliched phrase that the military says. I'm not military, but I'll say it anyway. Train how you fight.
Yeah.
So I don't mean dress down to your underwear and go to the range and roll out of bed and start shooting. But
I'm asleep in my onesie. I'm not taking that onesie to the range. I'll get laughed at.
Yeah, I mean, it's that same one from A Christmas Story, isn't it? That same rabbit, that pink rabbit suit. But yeah, gloves are fine for the range because if you do a lot of shooting, your gun certainly can get hot.
Especially if you're messing with a suppressor too. If you don't have a cover.
I keep a welding glove.
Yeah.
In my range bag because Skylar's a welder, and so she always has something I can just borrow.
Yeah.
And so she gave me a welding glove, and it's nice to be able to touch a hot suppressor with that to take it off. But that's pretty much that there. So yeah, ammunition, shot timer, safety stuff.
Targets,
yeah, a lot of cardboard, steel.
If you don't already have a range bag, build one.
Yeah.
Put a stapler gun in there too.
The stapler.
That is the number one thing I always forget. Spray paint, and I'm good with the spray paint, but stapler I always seem to go to the range.
Staples is me because I always run out of staples.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe we'll do an episode of what's in your range bag because I want to say one thing touching on range bags is I have my walkers, my pass-throughs, but I also have because there's so many pockets on these range bags. I just have they're cheap. Go out yourself like a big old quantity pack of earplugs. Because sometimes you're gonna have friends with you, and or sometimes maybe you
like winter time.
Yeah,
I'm wearing a big old hat. I'm not gonna wear over-ear headphones.
Yeah, so just dump a whole bucket of earplugs into a pocket. You'll be good to go in case you ever forget your headphones or your
Those little Surefire things are real nice too that go right in your ear.
Yep.
Yeah,
I like those too.
I haven't messed with those.
They're nice. They're like $25.
Yeah.
For the simple ones.
Yeah.
At Walmart. Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, it sounds a lot more simple than I had it in my head. So I'm glad I had this conversation.
It is.
So if you went out and you just got your first AR, hopefully this helps you as much as I know it's helped me. I've learned a lot so far. And because I'm a first-time AR owner, maybe this will stem some new some topics we can talk about later on. Maybe as I get better or worse or start practicing more.
Well, there's something that you mentioned here. We don't need to go into it now because it's pretty much just a passing comment. Is find a carbine match.
Okay.
Go find a 3-gun match. And just.
I wanted to ask about matches, but given the time we had, I knew we could really get into it.
You want to save that?
So we'll save it, but I do want to touch on a little bit here. And that is, what are your recommendations for, like me, for example, should I think it would probably be a good idea to go and actually watch these matches to know what you're getting yourself into first. Like, don't just go out and sign yourself up for one. Aww. Or should you?
Yeah, do it.
Do it?
Yeah, who cares? You're going to have suggestions as to what to bring. Bring 200 rounds of ammunition and this and that. And honestly, you can probably talk to someone who's running the match, say, hey, this is my first time, what should I bring? The people at matches are very, very nice to deal with. At least the ones that we've seen here, the ones that I've been to at Keystone, they're all really, really helpful, and they will lend you gear, they will lend you advice, because, there's not much on the line here. They're out here to have fun and get better.
Yep.
So don't worry about where you place. Don't worry about having a non-ideal weapon. Just get out there and shoot, because you will learn so much.
A lot of it's about training your muscles and how to move
and your
and
mind
react.
as well, dude.
It's not so much about the weapon you have. It's just you moving correctly.
Right. And you will discover so many of your shortcomings when you do a match. It's a humbling but informative experience. And something like this, your ideal 3-gun is a 16-inch barrel with a good low power variable on it that's really accurate, with a fast trigger. It's lightweight, doesn't have a light, doesn't have a suppressor, it has big old break. It's a different weapon entirely. But what you learn from a match like that is you learn how fast you can shoot, how accurately you can shoot from target to target to target, and then moving and weapon manipulation, reloads, that sort of stuff. You learn everything, and it puts pressure on you that you don't get when you train by yourself.
Right.
Because you're on the clock and you're in front of an audience.
People are watching.
Yeah. So that is enough to push you in the right direction of training while stressed.
So, in your opinion, it's a good idea. Do a little bit of shooting, but sign up for a match and see what you can do.
Yeah. Once you reach that foundation where you can stand up and hit a target that's 6 inches across at 100 yards offhand. Once you've hit that stage, go shoot a match. And once you have the safety bits down, like when you move, finger on the trigger guard like this, proper weapon safety maneuvers, you're not flagging everyone, you're not running around like this with your finger on the trigger and all that sort of stuff. Once you've got that good, go shoot a match.
Okay.
Yeah. Who cares if you suck?
Right.
Everyone's going to suck on the first go.
Right.
But it's so important to start there.
Yep.
Right. I agree. Well, guys, that is going to conclude today's episode of Group Therapy. I really appreciate you guys sitting down and letting me pick your brain. Again, if you are just kind of tuned in late into the episode, today we talked about the fact that I got my first AR and now I don't know what to do. And Derek is telling me what I need to do. So I appreciate that. Luke, thank you for being here, giving us your experience also, because I know you're very knowledgeable on many aspects. So that'll conclude today's episode. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the comment section below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening, you can write us in grouptherapy@eurooptic.com. We'll do our best to answer those questions, whether it's this episode or other episodes. We want to hear from you. And also, comment down below, what is or was your first AR? I'd like to know what other people are getting. What are some of the accessories? How do you set it up? You can also go back and watch our other episode on setting up your AR for home defense. And lastly, to touch on today's subject matter, we talked a little bit about guidelines and ATF. We have done a video on that. Please go back and watch it. I'm not sure how much longer that video is going to be relevant, but as of now, a lot of the things we talk about in the video are actually still going. Give it a week or two, and who knows what the NFA is going to do.
Who knows?
Yeah. But all right. Well, thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you on the next episode.